Taxiway 06, wind calm, altimeter 3037, contact tower with departure instructions.
And 447, Roger, 3037.
The Alaska Army and Air National Guard have become used to dealing with unusual events over the past several years. There was the Great Whale Rescue in the fall of '88 when a team of more than 40 Guard members were deployed to Barrow to assist the community. 2 weeks later, after an extraordinary exhibition of innovation by Guard aviators, Eskimo scouts, and a public affairs team, 2 of the 3 whales made it to the open sea. It was also an excellent display of man and machinery overcoming the elements. The Guard sky cranes were used for pulling, lifting, and bashing. And then there was diplomacy on the ice, working with the Soviets for a second time in less than 6 months. On reflection, the whales were but a prelude for what the new year was to bring. January 1989's plunging temperatures reached all-time lows, even for Alaska, in the minus 50s and 60s, and that didn't include the wind chill factor. The Guard and the Alaska Division of Emergency Services responded to communities' needs from one end of the state to the other. Hauling food, fuel, and power generation gear became an everyday event for nearly a month. The price tag exceeded $5 million in state and federal funds. Other events like the flooding along the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers, the defection of 2 Soviet journalists during a joint U.S.-USSR celebration on Little Diomede Island, the flash flooding of 1,000 homes in Anchorage, and the other 36 or so disasters that hit Alaska annually couldn't compare to what happened on Good Friday, 1989, 25 years to the day after the infamous Good Friday Alaska earthquake.
Valdez back. We've should be on the radar there. We've fetched up on the ground north of Goose Island off Boy Reef. And evidently leaking some oil.
It hit the beaches, and now it's sneaking around here. It's like a black, slimy evil.
There's a lot of places there that look clean, and you go up and kick a couple inches of sand off with your foot, and then you start finding this moose patties.
It's everywhere. You can take a walk if you want to walk back up in that river about a quarter of a mile, and there's oil back up in there. Areas you wouldn't even think there'd be oil. Way back up in there by fresh waterfall, there's oil.
When the workers were down here, they just removed the oil off the surface of the rocks. And they didn't get all of that. There's still a lot of rocks that are black with oil down here. If you dig into the sediments, the oil will flow from the sediments in here. So the subsurface is still contaminated and the surface is contaminated also.
What we hope to do is clean all the oil from the beach. We do not want to treat a beach. We don't accept that word. It's not in our vocabulary. We want to clean the whole beach.
The early morning hours of March 24th were as murky and dark as the nightmare the tanker Exxon Valdez would spill into Prince William Sound. At just past midnight, the now famous tanker would run aground on Bligh Reef, rupturing numerous internal tanks and spewing out nearly 11 million gallons of crude oil into the Sound. Some describe the horror of the black deathly ooze with near science fiction endowment. Others watched in bewilderment as the opportunity and ability to capture or restrain the spread of the oil was lost due to lack of time and on-scene resources. Vigilance had given way to complacency and neglect. In virtually the opening moments of the disaster, the Alaska Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, vis-a-vis the Alaska National Guard, the Alaska Division of Emergency Services, and elements of the Alaska Naval Militia responded. Emergency Services Director Irv Martin stated, "If there were any redeeming bright spots during the initial response phase of the disaster, it was due to the combined actions of ADES and the Guard. I think the Guard deserves a lot of praise. The community of Valdez was just waking up from their very long winter. It's a small town of 3,000 people and certainly not prepared to deal with such a major catastrophic event." Martin, working closely with a quickly assembled Joint Army and Air Guard operations staff, outlined his perceived needs: heavy airlift support, fixed wing and rotor, increased communications capabilities on land and sea, aerial, port, and traffic management, air traffic control, air transport management, security, fire service, and public affairs support. To meet these and other associated needs identified by the affected communities, the state and other authorities, Governor Steve Cooper ordered nearly 150 Alaska National Guardsmen and Naval Militia members to active duty. The combined team assembled in small groups and went right to work on the tasks before them. The first mission accomplished was that of putting a portable Earth station up on the top of an island. Using the CH-54B sky crane to lift it into place, the Guard was literally responsible for bringing the world the first pictures of the disaster. One official noted at the time that if it hadn't been for the Guard's willingness to do what was necessary to make the gear work from a remote Prince William Sound island, then we would have been left without the ability to make the most of our time and efforts. One of Martin's deputies, Pete Werpel, was appointed on-scene coordinator. In his view, working with the Guard went well because the major elements of the department had been rehearsing a variety of disaster response scenarios on several occasions just prior to this event, so there was a comfort and trust of having worked with each other. Werpel noted that the familiarity saved valuable time and effort in the face of nearly unbelievable stress. If the city of Valdez was just awakening from its winter sleep, then its airport was bursting out of its cocoon. Aviation Week and Space Technology magazine noted that the airport was used to handling 10 to 15 operations per day prior to the spill. Within 96 hours of the spill, operations were averaging 500 a day, just behind Anchorage International and Merrill Field, where over 1,000 aircraft are normally hangared. A Coulis Air National Guard Base crash crew was brought in as traffic continued at extremely high rates. The crew assisted in training the local volunteer fire department on how to respond to aircraft emergencies. Guard fuel specialists set up shop providing ramp-side refueling for the arriving variety of military and civilian aircraft. The local civilian operator had only single refueling points for fixed-wing and rotor aircraft. The apparent limited capacity caused long delays and safety problems on the taxiways. The Alaska National Guard established 2 additional refueling points on the opposite end of the runway with a 5,000-gallon tanker and a 1,200-gallon tanker. This reduced congestion and refueling time. Guard communicators provided critical links between the Exxon Valdez and the Emergency Operations Center in Valdez. Tactical satellite radios were used to deliver the messages between air, land, and sea. Guard communicators were able to pass vital weather, flight, and logistical information along. Captain Rich Johnson with the 176th Communications Flight at Coulis summed it up when he said, "If anything good came out of this, it was the experience and testing of our readiness. This will have a direct impact on our operational mission." Guard pathfinders, individuals qualified to certify helicopter landing zones, had also been busy. Their mission was to find and set up landing sites for military and civilian helicopters carrying cleanup supplies and equipment of all shapes, sizes, and dimensions. They were also busy rigging loads for the sky cranes. They were another group who required little guidance to be successful with their mission. The Valdez Air Terminal was not equipped nor manned to support the increased air traffic and associated passengers and cargo. Local airport management was unprepared with basic parking plans and mixed rotor, fixed-wing operations. The Guard provided management and aerial port teams that assisted the airport manager in organizing his airfield by establishing proper parking areas, designated taxiways for fixed and rotary wing aircraft, and airfield communications. They handled hundreds of tons of equipment, gear, and supplies of every type and dimension coming through that port and thousands of aircraft. The Guardsmen and the Naval Militia never lost focus of why they were there and what they were contributing to. Daily situation reports were posted for everyone to see. The progress of the oil as it continued to spread its damage and death along the Sound shoreline was also posted. Initially, we had to operate in an area about the size of the state of Rhode Island, the Guard's Adjutant General, Major General John Schaefer observed. As the flood of oil kept spreading southwest and threatening Seward and Kenai Peninsula, state and Guard leaders found themselves planning to fight on multiple fronts. One official wryly observed how he was beginning to get a feeling for just how much damage nearly 11 million gallons of crude oil can do, when he recognized that if this had happened on the eastern seaboard, the spill would have initially reached from Cape Cod to Virginia Beach and covered the shorelines of 8 states in the process. One of the great early accomplishments of Guard aviators was the ability to deliver up to 6,000 feet of rubberized oil boom materials by bringing them into Valdez aboard Air Guard C-130s and transferring it to the Sky Crane. The crane was then able to put it right on target where on-the-water crews could get at it and use it immediately. Guard leaders noted that the mixing of Sky Cranes and C-130s provided an effective force mix that got the job done. Sky Cranes were effective in providing an unusual variety of loads. When fuel was running in short supply at the Battle of Sawmill Bay, at a time when all booming resources were being used to try to save a salmon hatchery, it was a crane that brought in a load of 3 600-gallon fuel tanks for placement on a barge. The crane crew contributed directly to winning that important battle. Sky Cranes were used to haul a host of communications gear, even power generation equipment out to the Exxon Valdez itself. It was a skillful and tricky maneuver to complete. At one point, up to 3 Sky Cranes were in use in and along Prince William Sound. In addition to the Sky Cranes and the C-130s, the Guard's medium-lift Black Hawk helicopters played a role in transferring people and equipment, including a load of boom in and out of Valdez. The Guard employed other aircraft also, including the UV-18 Twin Otter, the C-12, and the venerable UH-1H Huey helicopter. Guard aviators flew nearly 250 hours in 6 types of aircraft at a cost of about $1 million. The combined Army and Air Guard aviators were credited with approximately 300 sorties within the first 3 weeks of the operation. They were also credited with contributing to the movement of over 300 tons of equipment and supplies. 3 LCM-8 landing craft were also used throughout the spring and summer. All one had to do was talk to the people of the Sound, from Valdez, Cordova, Chenega Bay, and anywhere else in and around the area, to understand how valuable information sharing was to them. One of our missions became keeping the Sound and the outside world informed of what we were doing. It happened several ways: through daily newsletters, faxed to over 110 locations throughout Alaska, as well as to the national and regional media of selected markets throughout North America, Europe, and Asia. Our public affairs team paid their freight on this effort, just like the operations teams always do. ADES on-scene coordinator Pete Werpel observed they also provided essential video and still photographic documentation of the spill's effects on people, the wildlife, and their environment. Between the growth of federal resources and private enterprise, the time came for the Alaska National Guard and the Naval Militia to gear down and turn over the activities to those ready to jump into the oil spill response and what it eventually became. In the Alaska Oil Spill Commission's report, Walter Meganak Sr., traditional village chief of the Alaska Native Subsistence Community of Port Graham, offered these words at a conference of mayors from spill-affected communities. It is too shocking to understand. Never in the millennium of our tradition have we thought it possible for the water to die, but it is true. What we see now is death. Death not of each other, but of the source of life, the water. We will need much help, much listening in order to live through the long, barren season of dead water, a longer winter than before. We have never lived through this kind of death, but we have lived through lots of other kinds of death. We will learn from the past, we learn from each other, and we will live.